Well, good morning, everybody. And I just wanted to recap the principles of good governance that we started covering in the class in the beginning, so that there is some continuity with regards to future lessons and future discussions and future lectures. So I'm going to share with you a brief PowerPoint which I've put together so that we can remember these principles. So to proceed further, why is this not moving here? Oh, I need to go. Give me a second, folks. So I need to go to slideshow, and yes, there I am. Okay, so when we talk about governance, governance is really, to my mind, about delivering public and promised goods and services. By public goods, what we really mean is if a government provides a particular benefit, that benefit is available to everybody regardless. For example, if the government is investing in cleaner water or clean air or safer neighborhoods or better roads, these are goods that are available to everybody who lives in the jurisdiction or who's passing through or who's merely visiting and staying for a short period of time. So public goods are those goods which, if made available, are automatically available to everybody else. Unlike, say, a swimming club or a golf club, which can be restricted to particular members only. So that is also a benefit. So you could start a club, but you will only limit it to members. So public good is one of the things that is a product that governance is all about. And the other is what I call as promised goods, which means that a government usually has a social contract. If somebody who's running for office, whether it's a governor, president, mayor, or county executive, they will make promises saying that if you elect me, I will provide you with better health care. If you elect me, I'll provide you with free college. If you elect me, I'll create more jobs. So these are not necessarily public goods, but these are promised goods. So governance is about delivering public and promised goods and services. And if the government or the governor or the elected person fails to deliver these public and promised goods, then that person is failing at governance. Governance is also a legitimate exercise of power and authority invested in a government. So the government is authorized to deal with crisis or pandemics, and if the government is doing that, it is using its power that is legitimately invested in it to provide the public goods, promised goods, then it is providing governance. So governance is, in a sense, a legitimate exercise of power that is invested in it via a constitution or some other legal mechanism, essentially through the consent of the people who are governed. And finally, while government is about structure, about distribution of power, whether we have two branches of government or three branches of government, or what is the distribution of power between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, and within the hierarchy, like what are the responsibilities of the federal government, what are the responsibilities of the state government, what we call federalism in the United States. So all of these structural distribution of power, responsibilities, authority, all of that is about government. Governance is about process. It's about doing things the right way, doing things according to law, doing things in an inclusive way. So governance is essentially about the process and the product at the end of the process. Government is essentially about structure and distribution of power. These are the elements of good governance, and this is one of the most common model that is often used. Let's quickly run through what these elements are. To my mind, the most important element of good governance is the rule of law, that not only does the government make rules, but should also itself follow the rule of law. It is only through rule of law that governmental procedures and governmental activities and governmental decisions gain their legitimacy. It also tells us as citizens that our government is responsive to us because it is following the rule of law. And that's how we can hold the government accountable by the rule of law. And there is no nepotism, no bribery, no corruption going on if the rule of law is followed. So one of the most important elements of good governance is following the rule of law. The second most important is accountability, and to a great extent, to keep the government in check. It should be accountable to the rules and laws of the land, but it also should be accountable to the people it governs. And that's why we have elections, and that's why we also have mechanisms by which we can oust people who are elected and are not being accountable. Such as impeachment process for the president and votes of no confidence to get rid of elected bodies. We want the government to be transparent, and this is a very important thing. In fact, there are continuous debates about to what extent should the government be transparent. In moments of crisis like the one that we are experiencing today, it is really vital that the government remain transparent. And it is through transparency that the government also builds trust. And in these moments of crisis, we want to trust our government. We want to trust what they are saying is coming. And the way you build trust is by long-term transparency. Transparency also allows us to verify whether the rule of law is being followed. It allows us to verify if accountability is being maintained. It also allows us to check if there is corruption or not. We want the government to be effective as well as efficient. Efficient means to do things in a way where there is no waste in terms of resources, and to doing things in the best possible way. And being effective is to do the best thing. So when you do things in the best possible way, you're being efficient. And when you're doing the best things, when you're doing the right thing, then you're being effective. And we want our government to make the right decisions in order to be effective. And then once those decisions are made, to execute those decisions in the best possible way and be efficient. We want the government to be responsive. We want our government to be responsive, which means that they listen to us and then modify their decisions, their priorities, their goals with regards to what we need. So for example, if the government decides that we need to work on the health of our citizens and therefore decides that a particular neighborhood should have tennis courts, now, it's quite possible that a majority of the people in that neighborhood love to play basketball as opposed to playing tennis. So making only tennis courts and not basketball courts can be unresponsive. And so if they get lots of letters and phone calls and emails from their constituency, the government should be able to decide, wait a minute, let's make some or more basketball courts, keep a few tennis courts, or make all basketball courts, whatever they deem is appropriate. But this responsiveness can only come from the other element of good governance, which is participatory, where you allow citizens and other bodies to be included in decision making through town hall meetings, through regular consultation with the people. So participation and responsiveness are two sides of the same coin, and governments which are inclusive and allow participation and are responsive tend to essentially manifest good governance. Otherwise, they will be out of sync with their own constituencies. And in democracies, that is a death knell to elected officials. We want the government to be equitable and inclusive. By equitable and inclusive, these are issues of social justice. We want the government to treat everybody equally, regardless of their race or religion or their lifestyle. And also make sure that we try as hard as we can to include them. So for example, if you have an elected body and a governing body which is all white men, so then there is exclusion of gender and there is exclusion of people of color and other persuasions. So even if the elected people are of a particular type, being inclusive would mean at least to find some ways of being participatory, bringing them in, or bringing them in appointed positions in some cities and provinces. Elected bodies have appointed advisory councils, which are more representative of the constituency, and thereby try to bring equity, and inclusiveness. So these are some of these are the main, essentially, principles of good governance. So there is also the point here about consensus oriented, and I'm not very sure that whether consensus building can often lead to good governance, but consensus building can definitely provide more and more legitimacy to the decisions that are being made. So these are the principles of good governance that we had already discussed so far in class. And because of this 2-week break and discontinuity, I wanted to revisit them so that they are fresh in our minds as we move forward. And so I will look forward to seeing you this afternoon. I hope you have watched the other videos, and we can hopefully have a fruitful conversation and discussion. Thank you very much.